My name is Jen Donovan. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner and a gut and psychology syndrome practitioner, and I am the owner and clinical director at Whole Body Healing with Jen. I also have a master's degree in family therapy and a history of working in the mental health field, but through my own journey, which I'll talk about in a bit, I ended up doing a bit of a career shift. Although I still do use a lot of the trauma recovery and nervous system techniques that I learned in that field in my current practice. I went back to school to become a nutritional therapy practitioner and a gut and psychology syndrome practitioner when I found that I needed more than just the nervous system work to recover from my own chronic illness. Whole Body Healing with Jen has been around for about 5 years now, and it has grown from just me to now an amazing team of clinicians that I supervise. I am the founder and I am the author of all the protocols, and I directly train and supervise the implementation of all of our programs and services. I started Whole Body Healing because I realized that we really need a new approach to addressing chronic illness. I got into remission from mast cell activation syndrome and dysautonomia, among other things, around 2019, and I was very public about my recovery online. I had really shared all aspects of my healing journey on Instagram through the years before that, and I had so many people reaching out to me being like, I have been trying to heal for so long, nothing's working, how did you do it? So I started Whole Body Healing because there was such a demand for people who were ready to take a very different approach in their recovery. So today, the webinar is Histamines, Anxiety, and Nervous System Dysregulation. I think it's really vital that we talk about our histamine response, our mental health, and our nervous system dysregulation all at the same time because they all come together. The people who come to work with our program at Whole Body Healing generally have very complex chronic illness, and it manifests in a wide variety of ways. Usually people who come to work with us have been diagnosed with or suspect some type of histamine intolerance or mast cell disorder, and usually there's some kind of nervous system disorder like dysautonomia, as well as psychiatric symptoms like severe anxiety all together. And they usually have presented to the medical world with all these overlapping, ambiguous, hard to pin down symptoms that are really debilitating in terms of how you're able to navigate your day-to-day life. But when you try to get help for these types of symptoms, what happens is what I call health whack-a-mole. And this can happen in both conventional Western medicine, but it also happens in the alternative or functional medicine sphere. And I'm going to talk today about why both approaches have truly failed us. Because most practitioners, whether they consider themselves conventional or they've slapped the term holistic on their business name, they're actually still using an allopathic approach. And an allopathic approach basically means we're just trying to minimize your symptoms. Someone might even say, oh, I'm doing root cause medicine, but then you get there and when you get their protocol and you do your intake with them, you realize they are still just chasing your symptoms. They're still just trying to suppress the complaints that you're coming in with instead of digging deeper and really figuring out the deeper processes going on. So, the clients I work with tend to have symptoms that either show up kind of chaotically on tests, like there's just so many different things going on, or don't show up at all on tests, but all in all, they're just very hard to pin down. People who come to work with us tend to get these or they describe having had these wide-eyed looks from their clinicians trying to explain their experiences that they're having daily in their body. And actually that's something I'm told by my clients that they appreciate about me, that I never give them that wide-eyed, stumped look, because believe me, I have heard it all. Most clinicians are stumped by the kinds of symptoms that come with these allergic nervous system disorders. They don't know what to make of the symptoms you're describing, but I've experienced a lot of them personally. Most of the coaches that work for me have also experienced these kinds of things personally, and we've all recovered. And so we're totally used to hearing this stuff, and we can help you understand what's really going on in your body. So at best, with most clinicians, you're gonna get these Band-Aid solutions. oh, you're having this symptom. Here, let's try this thing for that symptom. And for these more complex issues, especially if they've been going on for a while, the Band-Aid solutions just do not work. I mean, if they worked, you probably wouldn't be here at this webinar, right? Worst case scenario, they can actually make things worse. I've had a lot of people come to me who were already sick and then they tried a conventional intervention or they tried a more functional medicine intervention and their symptoms actually got much worse. So, I get it. You're tired of having these expensive and ineffective medications thrown at you, and then you've gone to see a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath, and they just have these expensive testing packages and super over-the-top supplement protocols. I mean, I've had people tell me they've spent tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, on testing packages and supplements. And most of the time, they don't work, or they're not tolerated, or again, maybe they even made you worse. So these tests, they're not always that accurate. They tend to build in a lot of fear and fatalism, and the reality is, you're still not getting to the root cause. They may tell you, you have to do all this testing so we can get to the root cause, but then when it comes back, they're like, oh, you have this genetic profile, or oh, you have this type of bacterial overgrowth, or oh, you have this type of mold toxicity. But they don't tell you why you've accumulated that toxicity, or why your immune system has seemed to be susceptible to that type of bacteria. So it's still this more surface level idea of what a root cause approach actually is. And I really believe that if you're working with an experienced clinician, they probably could have told you those basics just by looking at your symptom list. When you understand the gut-brain axis, which we're going to talk about more later, you understand how those disruptions manifest as symptoms. So this is why I guarantee you, you're not going to come to Whole Body Healing and get thrown a super expensive testing package or all these really excessive, expensive supplements. A lot of our clients can't even tolerate supplements at all when they come to us, and we don't require people to take supplements at all. We just find that it's expensive, it's ineffective, and we can usually just do a comprehensive assessment of your symptoms and already have a general idea of what's going on. So we have people recover all the time without doing any testing. Now, sometimes diet and lifestyle is discussed when you go to work with an alternative clinician, but usually they're very surface level interventions. They tell you, oh, work on stress management, right? Or like, here's the top 5 foods to eliminate to heal your gut. And it's like, okay, well, I could have Googled that. The reality is, once you have complex chronic illness, we need a much more nuanced plan from people that really understand the intricate details of nutrition, because by the time you develop some of these conditions I'm talking about, you probably have a myriad of really complex sensitivities, and not everyone is skilled at taking all of those into account while still strategically starting to unwind the root cause at the same time. So that's really what our protocols specialize in, is taking into account all of the very specific issues and sensitivities that you might be dealing with. We see very common patterns with this, and we know how to accommodate that while still working on healing your gut and nervous system. Now, the last thing that can happen when you go to the doctor, and whether it's conventional or a functional doctor, is that sometimes you just get dismissed with having an anxiety disorder. This is especially true if nothing is showing up on tests. So if a clinician is not familiar with how these types of histamine and mast cell disorders work, or how all the ways that nervous system dysregulation can pop up, they'll just say, your symptoms don't make sense to me. I don't have any idea what this means. I don't know why you're reacting so badly to these supplements. Everything I'm giving you, this should all work, so I don't understand why you're saying it's making you feel worse. This does not fit in the framework of how I understand bodies and how I understand medicine. So here's a psychiatrist, right? It's so dismissive. And this drives me especially crazy because anxiety is a symptom of histamine and mast cell conditions. It is a symptom of nervous system dysregulation. Hey, got a little friend here. This is Wendy. So, instead of anxiety being a dismissal, it can actually corroborate that there is something deeper going on. So at Whole Body Healing, we take pride in having a deeper understanding of what mental health symptoms can actually indicate about what's going on in your body. It's all part of the picture. This fits into an understanding of the gut-brain axis as a whole. So, to summarize this whole first section, I really want to reiterate that you don't have to play health whack-a-mole. If you have ambiguous symptoms, all sorts of sensitivities and allergies, a highly dysregulated nervous system, all sorts of anxiety, and maybe other mental health issues as well, you don't have to chase each one of those anymore. And if there's autoimmunity or a skin disorder or a collagen disorder or anything else also going on, that's okay. We are here for you at Whole Body Healing. We can address these all at once, and I hope I've explained some of the pitfalls that both conventional and functional medicine can fall into, which is why you maybe have not benefited from either of those approaches. The reality is, all of these symptoms and conditions that I'm talking about all likely have the same root cause. So your daily constellation of symptoms is kind of like the symphony of your body telling you exactly what is wrong and exactly what it needs to heal. There is an art of listening to the song that all the symptoms together are making. The symptoms are the language of the body. Each symptom is a note in a song. And just so many of us have forgotten to understand what the music of the body indicates. Even the most well-meaning professionals just often don't have this knowledge. They've been trained in this more allopathic approach, and it makes you feel like your body is chaotic. But it's not chaotic if we understand the bigger, comprehensive, truly holistic framework. Suddenly the language of the body starts to become clear, and we have a pathway forward. So in my years of coaching, in the years of my own healing, what I learned was that the things that made the biggest difference for me in healing my chronic illness were the simplest things. It was the nitty-gritty, day-to-day things that I did. It wasn't just a crash detox. Those just never worked for me. It was months and months of consistency and discipline. So it's simple, but it's hard. It takes a lot of patience. It takes some really deep changes in your body, mind, and spirit. But it is simple. We don't have to complicate it the way that so many people are today. So the biggest thing that you're gonna see when you come to work with us is that we simplify things. We can support you through the parts that are hard, that do require that discipline and that consistency, but we're just gonna make things so much simpler for you. And to do that, we really need to change our worldview. We have to let go of this linear reductionist approach in our current medical thinking. That's okay when you broke your leg, right? That's like a very clear-cut acute injury. It's like, okay, we just need to set the bone, right? It can be addressed from this linear approach and we can get away with that. But complex chronic illness is so different than that. We're dealing with a disruption on a mind-body, gut-brain connection level. And so we have to understand there's more systemic, more comprehensive ways of looking at the body. And so that's the biggest thing we do at the beginning with our clients, is we just help people change their worldview. We help people understand their bodies and what is going on with them and what their place in the world is in a very different way. So when you come to work with us, we're really gonna ask you to open your minds and really start to see your symptoms and see your illness in a very different way. And when we do this, generally what we find with people, and this was my experience too, that everything else we need to do to recover just kind of effortlessly falls into place. So I really want to get down to the specifics of what we offer at Whole Body Healing, of how our protocols work, but I want to take a little detour and tell you more about my story, because I think you're really going to relate to it and it's going to help you understand everything I'm saying a little better, and then we'll go back to more the nuts and bolts of things. So when I was 25, I was very, very ill. Now that I look back, I can see how it kind of built over my life. Right, I always had little nagging health issues all through my life, but by the age of 25, it got very extreme. I had, a bad virus, and I had a couple infections and a lot of antibiotics and some surgery. And I was in grad school. I was very, very stressed. So I think all of that really accumulated and probably really imbalanced a system that was already very weak. So now, where I am now, I've been in remission long enough. I've been in remission since I was 29. And so sometimes I forget actually how bad it got. And I'll see like old journal entries, or I'll look at old pictures of myself and I'm like, oh wow, I was really sick. And when I really think about what it was like at that time, I really thought I was dying. And looking back, I really think that I was. I think if I had not intervened as quickly as I did, it would have gotten very, very bad for me. My body was not lying. This is really common with mast cell activation and related disorders, that you get this very visceral sensation that your body is shutting down. And it's this really overwhelming sense of dread or doom that fills up your body. And so if you are feeling that right now, you're not crazy. Your body is telling you, hey, we're not messing around anymore. I need you to understand what's going on. I need you to help me. I can't hold this together anymore. I need you to make some conscious changes in your life. I need your attention. I need your help. So I was trying to explain this to doctors and specialists. I was like, I think I'm dying. I think I'm dying. And of course, they thought I was totally crazy, and I was referred to psychiatry. I had hysteria on my medical chart for a while. That's how bad it was, you guys. But luckily, I was able to find an allergist eventually who actually knew about mast cell and histamine disorders. And this was back in 2016, so these were a lot rarer back then. Now, unfortunately, they're much more common. But she had actually just been to a conference with Dr. Afrin, and so she had gotten trained by like one of the leading mast cell doctors in the world. And she was like, wow, you fit the diagnostic criteria exactly. And so she gave me the diagnosis, and I'm gonna show here my list of symptoms that I was having pretty much daily at this time. I think a lot of you will relate to it. Not everyone with histamine and mast cell issues has this full list. Some people will have like half these symptoms, or some people will have symptoms that I don't have on this list. There were a few symptoms that sometimes other people with these conditions have that I didn't have. So that's part of the issue with these conditions, is it's not super clear cut. Some people, the symptoms are much more neurologically focused. Other people like me had much more like true allergic symptoms, but it can also manifest as mostly psychiatric for some people, or be more closely related to like a nervous system disorder. So this is part of why we need to get away from that health whack-a-mole, because you can see this ridiculously huge symptom list, and if you are trying to find a specialist for every single symptom, you're trying to find a medication or a supplement for every single symptom, you're gonna be chasing your tail forever and you're not gonna get anywhere. So just to summarize, at my worst, I had a safe food list of about 10 foods. And I work with people whose safe food list is even smaller than that. So in some ways, I was lucky that I could eat that many foods at my worst. But I was very restricted in what I could eat. And actually, even with those 10 foods, I had a reaction every time I ate. Those were just the 10 foods I reacted to the least. I could kind of maintain my life eating just those foods. I did have a lot of dysautonomia symptoms, so things like shortness of breath and tachycardia and palpitations. I had really severe fatigue. I had really bad headaches. I couldn't stand for very long without getting lightheaded. I had really low blood pressure, like 80/60 at one point. And yeah, all the classic allergy symptoms, sinus issues, eye issues, swollen lips, tight throat. I would wake up every morning with like these swollen, blotchy cheeks, and I was getting hives multiple times a day, every day. I had super severe anxiety, like those dread attacks I was talking about, and honestly, I felt really delusional. I asked my personal therapist at the time if she thought I was having a psychotic break. And she was like, well, people who are having a psychotic break don't think they're psychotic, so I think you're okay. But I really felt on the edge there. And actually, a lot of people with psychosis, it is related to a histamine or mast cell disorder. You do get very paranoid when you have high amounts of histamine in the brain, and you will often obsess about things that maybe aren't objectively real or true. So this is something really important to keep in mind. If you struggled with those symptoms, that can actually be more of an indication that you may be dealing with this constellation of issues. So just as a reminder, we don't care whether you have an official diagnosis or not. We are not doctors. We don't diagnose these conditions. We don't bill insurance. We don't need to list a diagnostic code on your file so that we can bill insurance. So even if you just suspect these conditions, you can come work with us. If you resonate with what I'm talking about, you're very likely going to be a good fit for us. So let's segue here into understanding a bit more about what mast cells are actually doing in the body. What they do is they patrol around the body like a little army, and when they encounter what they perceive as a toxin, they degranulate. This means that they break apart and release histamine, and I want to emphasize what I said, which is anything they perceive as a toxin. This is why two people can be exposed to the same thing and have two different responses. So not everyone who lives in a moldy house will get mold illness, right? And not everyone who gets a virus or has a high viral load will then develop a nervous system or histamine disorder, but other people will. Not everyone that is exposed to heavy metals will develop a condition like this, but others will. So there's a lot of factors as to why some people will and some people won't. We do teach more about that in our programs. I'll share a little more about that in a bit, but I really want to emphasize that. It's often less to do with objectively what was going on in your body, like if we could do a perfect scan and see. It's less about that and more about how your entire gut-brain axis is responding to what is going on. So this is what, again, why we need to really zoom out. So a toxin could be mold, could be your own hormones, could be your own thoughts that are releasing certain patterns of neurotransmitters. But whatever it is, histamine is what is released when the mast cell degranulates. And when mast cells degranulate and release histamine, you get those classic allergic symptoms very often. So things like the runny nose, the fatigue, the brain fog, the anxiety, rashes. Even people who have hay fever, in the spring can relate to this. Even when you cut your finger and you get a little rash, like a little red irritation around the cut, that's a small histamine reaction. It kind of hurts and it itches when it's healing. And that's histamine. It's actually a healing hormone in the body. It's pushing out toxins, it's trying to heal tissues, it's causing a small amount of local inflammation to try to help you recover from damage and toxicity. That's what is happening. So, histamine release is actually a totally normal mechanism in the body. Histamine is not evil. Mast cells are not bad. We need them. We need to be able to heal damage in the body, and this is part of the reason we don't just want to be suppressing your symptoms. We need the histamine to push out toxins and viruses and whatever else that is in your body out. But what makes it a problem for some people, and I'm gonna really put this in air quotes, because I actually believe that the body is responding perfectly and logically when you understand the full context, but there are either too many mast cells, right? So that's defined as mastocytosis, or they're degranulating at too high a rate. That's what is defined as mast cell activation syndrome, or your body is not processing out the histamines and returning to a baseline, fast enough, and that's what's defined as histamine intolerance. So you can see that whatever your specific diagnosis is, they're all on the spectrum of the same underlying things really happening in the body, just in slightly different ways. So we don't really care what of those diagnoses you have or suspect. We're still going to address the deeper root causes in the same way, regardless. So there are people who do have more of a genetic predisposition to developing these conditions. So if you have had your genes tested, you probably have something like MTHFR or COMT. These are mutations that can make your detox pathways run a little bit slower. So you're not going to be processing out toxins or excess histamine in as efficient a way as someone else would, leaving you more susceptible to these symptoms. Or you might have a mutation on what are called the KIT genes, and these are genes that regulate histamine as a hormone in the body. And so if you have a mutation there, your body might be more prone to becoming a little dysregulated in this area. Some people are diagnosed with what's called HAT, or hereditary alpha-tryptosemia, and this just means you might have a higher amount of mast cell activation at baseline. Like your mast cells are just a little more eager to degranulate maybe than your average person. So you're going to be, again, more susceptible to developing these kinds of symptoms. So that is part of the reason why two people might be exposed to the same thing and one person's going to develop these conditions and another person is not. It probably does have a lot to do with underlying genetic susceptibility. But we need to make it really, really clear that genetics are not destiny. I have had so many people come to me with those genes. I have some of those genes. I've recovered. I have had so many clients with those genes recover, even people with HAT, which is often considered the genetic form of mast cell activation syndrome and considered especially incurable. I've had people recover, even with those genes. So this is why I don't even really recommend that people get their genes tested, because usually it's just going to make you feel scared and defective when there are still so many things we can do to modulate your genetic expression. Our protocols are designed to lower the expression of these genes so they don't affect you as much. Okay, so let's detour back a bit to my story. I did a lot of things that did not work, so I want to save you that. And this is, that whole first year when I was 26, after I got diagnosed and I was trying to figure out what to do, I was just, in such a spiral. And so I want to share a bit about that with you so you don't get stuck there. So I got diagnosed. My allergist said, here's some high-dose antihistamines, here's a mast cell stabilizer, we're just gonna have you on these the rest of your life. And I was like, that's it? I just have to take medications the rest of my life? What? And she said, yep, you're gonna have this condition the rest of your life. And, she did say, to her credit, I have heard that sometimes people do spontaneously recover. So maybe that'll happen to you, but just let's figure out what your triggers are and try to have you avoid them and just take these medications and we'll just see what happens. And I had such a hard time with that. I've always been a little bit of a rebel. I've always had a really inquisitive mind. I always want to understand things on a deeper level. And I thought, that doesn't seem right. There's gotta be more to this. So she didn't have any answers as to what was going on when I would ask her, but why? Why is my immune system doing this? Why is my nervous system doing this? She just kind of wrote it off as I don't know, your immune system just started malfunctioning. We don't know why. So that was really the last nail in the coffin of when I lost faith in Western medicine. Again, I am all for Western medicine if you have a heart attack, or you break your leg, or you get an acute infection. It's wonderful for that, but it needs to stay in its lane. And I decided at that point, okay, they don't have anything for me. They do not understand these kinds of conditions. I'm going to go see an alternative medicine doctor. So that was my next step, as is for a lot of people. I went to see a naturopath, and this naturopath was actually very helpful. I do credit her for a lot in putting me on the right path. So I definitely don't want to paint this whole field as problematic. I do think there are a lot of problems in the field that I will describe through my story, but she was really the first person that explained to me what a root cause perspective was, what a holistic perspective was. She said, look, your immune system's not malfunctioning. There's reasons why your immune system is responding in this way. There's a reason your mast cells are seeing some kind of massive threat in your body. So she said, we just have to figure out what your immune system is reacting so strongly to. So I was thrilled with this idea. I was like, great, someone wants to actually get to the root cause and figure out why my immune system is behaving in this way. So of course the answer was, here, take these thousands of dollars worth of tests. And I did it. I got sucked in, and it sucked because I was really broke at the time. I wasn't really able to work very much, but I managed to get all this testing done, and everything came back positive. Every test she ran, it came back positive. So I had SIBO, I had parasites, I had heavy metal toxicity, I had mold exposure, like literally everything she tested for came up like, boop, that's here. And I was so overwhelmed because what that communicated to me was like, oh my gosh, my body is completely overrun with toxins and I'm so broken, and I got so stuck in a fear loop. Like, why is my body accumulating all of this? Like, what is wrong with it? And her answer to me was, we don't know why you're accumulating so much toxicity, but we need you to detox. Like, we need to kill off all these overgrown microbes. We need to detox the heavy metals. So like, here's some antimicrobials, here's some binders, here's some chelators. Like, we gotta really just cleanse. And I really tried that because it was the closest thing I had found that seemed like it provided a coherent answer for me. But I reacted to every single thing she gave me. I kept trying because, I really thought there's no other way. But I would wake up the next morning and my face would be all swollen and covered in hives, and I'd just be feeling so bad. And I was like, there's no way that this is the answer. I mean, I was still so unstable and my reactions felt so scary that I was just not strong enough to do what she wanted me to do. So I thought about, okay, well, what are some foundational things that I can do? And I mean, I did implement a low histamine diet. I did cut out top inflammatory foods. She definitely gave me that basic dietary advice. And to her credit, like, that did help. I had been eating a very, what I thought was a healthy diet before that, but now that I know what I know, it was not. I mean, I thought because I ate vegetables every day and whole grains every day that I was on a healthy diet, but then I would eat like takeout and ice cream at night. So anyway, so cutting out the processed food and cutting out the takeaway food and just really getting down to some basic whole foods. Like, I went dairy-free, I went gluten-free, I went soy-free, I did all those things. I cut out sugar. And so the only foods that were in those that low histamine, like whole food diet parameters was that I didn't react to was oatmeal, rice, sweet potato, like a couple vegetables like cabbage and Brussels sprouts, and olive oil and chicken. And that was it. That was my 10 foods. And it did help reduce my symptoms a bit. When you do simplify that way and you cut out the junk, it can really help. But I really plateaued. Like, I saw a little decrease in symptoms. Like, I was having 10 symptoms a day instead of 20 symptoms every day. So that was good, but it was not enough to allow me to recover. And I wasn't stable enough to do any of the deeper cleansing work that she wanted me to do. And mentally, I was in this huge fear loop. Like, I really was seeing myself as broken. I was really seeing myself as like, something is wrong with me. And honestly, most of the clients we get at Whole Body Healing have really taken on this belief about themselves too. And when I'm doing intakes and assessments with people, I hear this all the time. Like, oh, I don't detox. I'm just full of infections. My gut is so messed up. I'm full of so many toxins. My immune system's broken. My gut doesn't work. Like, I hear these things all the time. And, you may have said those things. And even if you're not explicitly saying those things, you may be feeling that or thinking that on a deeper level. And so I was really stuck. Again, I had done a little bit of stabilization. I understood that there were things going on that were making my immune system behave that way, but like I didn't have anywhere else to go. And that's where a lot of clients are when they come to whole body healing, is like they've done some of the first steps, but they're just stuck. They don't have a clear way forward from that point. So I had this really fortuitous series of events. I think I mentioned at the beginning that I was a mental health therapist at this point in my life. I had graduated from graduate school. I was working in community mental health, and I was a trauma specialist. Now, by this point, I was not able to work very much because I was having panic attacks and mast cell symptoms and dysautonomia symptoms at work every day. And like it was hard for me to even walk, it was hard to drive, it was hard to leave my house, I was calling in sick all the time. So I kept cutting back on my hours, you know, being like, well, okay, maybe I can handle going in 3 days a week, maybe I can handle just going in, you know, 3 or 4 hours at a time. But I was still doing a lot of training because I was still at the beginning of my career, and so I was still learning some somatic techniques. I was getting trained in a modality called tension and trauma releasing exercises, working on my certification because I was hoping, you know, fingers crossed that I got my health back and could work more, that this would be a tool I could use with some of the very traumatized clients that were working with me. And so you have to go through this very intensive program to get certified in this modality. I'm still certified in it, and this is what I use in all my programs. So if you come to Immune Resilience, our coaching program, you will learn this modality. And the reason I use it with all my clients is because it completely changed the entire course of my recovery. So this is what really made my progress get unstuck. So I was learning these nervous system regulation tools. I was understanding the philosophy of understanding how the nervous system is really the orchestrator of the whole body, and I was engaged in these practices on a daily basis. And I had this incredibly profound intuition. This wave of realization came over me that my body was actually not broken. Nothing was wrong with it. There wasn't too much histamine in my body. There weren't too many mast cells. My body was just not accumulating toxins for fun. I was not just overrun with infections because I was defective. Rather, my body was innately intelligent. And if I didn't understand why something was happening, it was not because something was wrong with my body or that it was broken, it was that I just didn't understand. And so it suddenly all made sense. Like, if you really understand how the nervous system evolved, you have to understand that we have deep epigenetic wisdom. Now, if you're not familiar with the term epigenetics, this is how your genes shift in response to your environment, and it can get passed down through families. So if your grandparents or parents encounter something, like they've studied this with the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors actually, is that genes around stress tend to be upregulated, right? Like there's higher stress hormone release, even multiple generations down the line. And this is an undeniable fact. Like, we have this very clearly documented. So we talk about epigenetic trauma, but we don't talk about epigenetic wisdom. And this is so important because the reality is you are the descender of every single ancestor who survived to reproduce. I really want you to let that sink in. We have thousands, millions of years of survivors behind us. And it's not because it's easy out there in the natural world. It's rough out there, right? Like, if you worked on a farm or, you know, you've watched any nature documentary, you know, it's a tough world out there. And we are the descendants of everybody who survived that wild world out there. And so we are innately incredibly resilient. We have faced all the obstacles, all the predation, all the natural disasters, all the warfare, and we've come out to fall in love and have children and raise those children intergenerationally, right? All the way back. So trauma is unavoidable in the wild. You're gonna get chased by lions. You're gonna deal with droughts. You're not always gonna get something to eat when you want it. You're gonna have a hurricane come in and you have minimal shelter. And all our ancestors prevailed that. So this means we hold a deep primal wisdom on how to survive, on how to be resilient, on how to move forward and still love and still raise our children in every cell of our body. And the gut-brain axis, the connection between the gut and the brain, is the epicenter of this wisdom. So we have a nerve called the vagus nerve, and we work a lot on vagal toning in our programs, which is basically how you tone the function of the vagus nerve so that it's functioning in a bit more of an optimal way. It's really a bundle of nerves, and it connects all the way from our gut lining all the way up into our brainstem, and along the way connects to almost every major organ. And this is a communication process that is constantly happening in our body without us even being conscious of it. It's the primal brain communicating to the gut, and more specifically, all of the microbes in our gut. And all of those microbes that live in our gut communicate to our primal brain. Our whole body is an ecosystem, and it's communicating to itself and to us all the time, helping us, telling us what we need to do to navigate the world safely. We also have something called a psoas muscle, and this connects from the front of our hip flexors all the way through the center of our body to the back of our rib cage. And as we're developing as an embryo, this muscle basically unfolds from the center of our body, and so it holds our deepest core awareness in the center of ourselves. So it's really more of a sensory organ, and this is where a lot of our gut wisdom is held. Like if we talk about gut feelings or instincts, this is what we're talking about. So we have this psoas muscle, this nerve bundle, and the whole ecosystem in our digestive tract. It's this incredibly diverse population of microscopic critters that co-evolved with us. It includes bacteria and viruses and fungus and parasites, and so many people nowadays just think of those things as bad, right? Germs are bad, germs are scary, but we actually co-evolved with them, and they've always been with us, and we actually rely on them, and they actually rely on us. Like, we're their host, we're their home, and they are a core piece of this epigenetic center of wisdom that I'm talking about. So we need to build this mutually beneficial relationship with these organisms, with the core of our body, with the communication that happens between the gut and the brain. So this is how we've survived so much as a species. We've been able to migrate to all corners of the earth. We've adapted to all sorts of different environments and stressors. And yeah, we have experienced trauma and injury and stress along the way. We have healed from all of it. And this means that our bodies are spontaneously, naturally healing all the time. So in some ways, my allergist who told me sometimes people just recover, she wasn't totally wrong. I mean, if there are no obstacles in place, people do. People should just be naturally, spontaneously healing from whatever toxin or stress they are coming into contact with. So that does lead us to the important question: why can't we just do nothing and expect our bodies to heal? Why doesn't that happen for people like us with complex illness? What is causing this explosion of chronic illness that we see today? If we're so innately resilient, where is that resilience now? Well, there's just been some major obstacles put in place that are blocking those innate healing capacity and stopping us from the tissue regeneration and the detoxification processes that naturally exist in our body to unfold in the way they were always meant to. So we need to understand where this comes from. And it's a combination of microbial hijack, high levels of toxicity, and an unresolved trauma response. So this is where we're really going to get into the nuts and bolts of why we're seeing so much chronic illness today, what are the true root causes of what is going on for you, and how we can actually resolve those. So all of your problems come back down to this trifecta. Histamine issues, mast cell issues, collagen issues, nervous system issues, autoimmune issues, digestive issues, whatever constellation you're dealing with, this is just your individual expression of these three primary concerns that are happening simultaneously. So these things are blocking your body from its innate resilience. So it no longer feels safe enough to heal. It's actually not possible to heal if your body does not feel like it's in a safe place. Healing is a really vulnerable process, and we need to make sure that we are actually facilitating a healing sanctuary both inside and outside of our body, because if we do, those innate healing mechanisms will just kick back in and things just resolve on their own. So you can see how this becomes a feedback loop, and that's probably where a lot of you are. That's certainly where I was before I had this realization, that if your body isn't healing optimally, you start feeling unsafe, right? If you've got this trifecta of factors keeping us locked in and constricted, we start to feel unsafe, and we have symptoms, and then we feel even less safe, and then we have even less capacity to heal, and the illness gets worse, and the illness itself becomes traumatizing, and oh my gosh, what a snowball, right? You get the idea. We have more complex symptoms happening over time instead of improvements. Your body is just seeing more and more threats everywhere. You're still encountering stress and toxins and pathogens all over, because again, that's a normal part of life. We've always encountered stress and toxins and pathogens, but now our body is less able to deal with those. All of those innate pathways of addressing those things are turned off, and so they just keep accumulating. And pretty soon you're in this zigzag pattern between fight, flight, and freeze, right? You're just either panicked or you're in despair. Your immune system is overactive and underactive simultaneously. You go back and forth between complete terror and total hopelessness. And you're just bouncing back and forth in chaos. So we've got to break this pattern. And what I ended up doing that finally got me out of this pattern was, first of all, have this realization, like, oh, nothing's wrong in my body. I am not just defective. There are root issues to what is going on, but I need to go back to the foundations and not do any crash cleansing, crash detoxing, but actually make my body feel safe first. Don't have to chase symptoms. We just have to rebuild the daily foundations of our lives, and then the natural healing mechanisms will start to turn back on. So let's talk about how we build safety with each of these three factors: the microbial hijack, the toxicity, and the trauma. So when I say microbial hijack, I mean the gamut of what many practitioners are going to call gut dysbiosis, leaky gut, chronic microbial imbalances and infections. So people will call this, oh, you have SIBO, oh, you have parasites, oh, you have candida, right? And this causes inflammation in the digestive tract. It's often causing a lot of digestive issues, but it's going to cause symptoms all over the body. So let's talk about how we build safety in the digestive tract. So we use a very simple approach. It starts off fairly restrictive in a very strategic way, because we have to really account for all the types of sensitivities and intolerances that you are coming to us with. Our goal is to reduce, but mostly even completely reverse the sensitivities. So you're not gonna have to cater to these forever, and it's actually not helpful to. We don't wanna be in fear around food. Again, fear is like part of the issue, right? So we wanna make sure that we do a very simplified gut healing diet that takes your sensitivities into account. And so to do this, we use our own version of the specific carbohydrate diet. We like this diet because it doesn't chase symptoms the way things like the autoimmune protocol or low FODMAPs does. We don't find that those are actually effective at fully rebalancing the gut microbiome. It still has you eating things that can be irritating and stressful to the digestive tract, that can make your digestive tract basically not feel safe. And this diet has been actually used for over 100 years. It's so effective that it's been used for that long. So what it does is it simplifies things. It really just eliminates complex carbohydrates, so primarily starch, for a period of time. Because what happens is when we have a weak digestive tract, when our whole digestive process is just doesn't have the oomph that we need it to, we don't properly break down long chain carbohydrates. So what happens is when these aren't broken down properly, they irritate the digestive tract, and then microbes that are opportunistic, that will overgrow if they are given the chance to, tend to feed on these undigested starches, and they start to really proliferate, getting everything out of whack. So we have to go back to the beginning, and we basically have to redo what should have happened when you were a baby. And many people don't have a properly resilient gut from the time they are a very little kid. Maybe you've had symptoms that long, maybe you haven't, but a lot of people today are not weaned properly, and the foods that they're introduced with first never allow their digestive tract to fully build resilience. And their internal ecosystem, their microbiome, is just always imbalanced. Their gut lining has always been irritated, and then this really gets exacerbated when you have these kind of final triggering events that occur, right, that lead you into deeper illness. So we focus on making sure we're not irritating the gut lining with these complex carbohydrates, that we're not actively feeding overgrown bacteria. And because the bacteria are the primary modulators of our immune function, we can really turn our immune system back on this way. A lot of the bacteria in our digestive tract lives in what is called the GALT, or the gut-associated lymphatic tissue, and this houses about 70% of our immune system. So we can make a major difference in how your immune system functions by being mindful of what we're eating and not actively feeding the overgrowth, and providing very soft, easier to digest foods that not only stop irritating the gut lining, but actually intentionally nourish our immune cells. And so many people's symptoms just start shifting by that simple intervention. So we don't just focus on what we eliminate, we also make sure that we're prioritizing nutrients that can help seal the gut lining on a cellular level, and also nourish the nervous system, which is often very damaged in the digestive tract too, and we need to work on regenerating that. So this also is a modified version of the GAPS diet, which you may have heard of. I am a certified GAPS practitioner, so I have been trained in that modality. And so the foods that we prioritize contain really essential fatty acids and amino acids and minerals and B vitamins and probiotic foods in order to make sure we're providing the proper nourishment to allow your tissues to start regenerating by themselves. However, the classic GAPS diet, like if you Google it, it does not take into account a lot of the really high sensitivities that the people who come to us are dealing with. So I was not able to just do the GAPS diet when I was very sick. There's a lot of high histamine foods, there's a lot of other foods that people often will react to in those protocols. So, we get all sorts of high sensitivities. And you may or may not know exactly what you're all reacting to. That's why we take care of the science and all the nuances of nutrition, and we make sure we understand issues like glutamate and lactic acid and oxalates and lectins and salicylates. Ultimately, we want to reverse these sensitivities. These compounds occur in all sorts of healthy whole foods, so we want to get you to a place where you can eat those again without fear, but we often do have to accommodate those sensitivities at first until we can get your gut more resilient, and then we bring those foods back. So I call this my low histamine gut rebuilding diet. And our curriculum teaches you how to restrict strategically and then expand your diet strategically over time. And this allows you to build that resilience and diversity in your gut lining and your gut microbiome, so you can reintroduce foods that used to trigger you while maintaining your remission. So that's our nutritional approach. Next, I'm going to talk about the toxicity, and it's a huge pattern that people who develop these complex chronic illnesses have genetic predispositions to be more sensitive to toxins they encounter and also have slower detoxification pathways. So toxicity is a big issue for everyone in the modern world. We are really inundated with all sorts of heavy metals and pesticides and other chemicals in the modern world. And I'm guessing if you've had your genes tested, you've probably come up positive for variations like MTHFR or COMT. I have those too. But again, this does not mean that you can't live in the modern world without developing a chronic illness. You do detox if you have these genes. So if anyone's told you, oh my gosh, this means you don't detox, that is not true. We all detox. It just means that we detox a little slower than the average person, and we might need more nutrients to maintain those pathways to be effective. So the problem that happens is we get a high exposure to toxicity. Everyone does, right? This is just the reality of the modern world. But then we also have slow detox pathways and a higher level of sensitivity to toxic exposure. So that means when mast cells are patrolling around looking for toxins, they're going to degranulate and they're going to release histamine. And probably if you've tried to do a crash detox or cleanse, your symptoms have gotten a lot worse because now those toxins are being pulled out of your tissues and mast cells are encountering more of them, and so you're going to have more symptoms. Honestly, it really bothers me that people are out there promoting a 4-week mold detox or a 6 weeks heavy metal detox. There's a reason our programs are 6 months minimum. We actually have programs that last for a year if you graduate to our alumni program, but there's no such thing as detoxing mold in 4 weeks or detoxing heavy metals in 6 weeks. We have been accumulating these toxins for probably about 3 generations now, if not longer. There was this huge toxic boom post-World War II when they were repurposing chemical weapons into the things we fertilize our foods with and all sorts of other products that we just take for granted that we use on a daily basis in cleaning and hygiene. And so we have to take this as a long-term project, and we have to listen to our body that's telling us too much, too fast, and we have to do this very gently. So we do bring in detoxification practices, and we bring in practices to help support your liver and your other detox organs. But again, very slowly, very gently. It needs to be long-term and sustainable and honor your body's needs. So now we get to the unresolved trauma and stress. Trauma and stress are a normal part of life. I do not want to somehow indicate that we have to eliminate all stress from our life in order to heal. It's absolutely not true. We are never going to live a trauma-free life, and honestly, it's actually not something to strive for. People do gain wisdom and resilience from appropriate levels of trauma and stress in our lives. So we don't need to just eliminate stressors from our life. We actually need to focus on building resilience. Our nervous system is actually designed to release and resolve traumas and stress, right? We've encountered traumas and stress in the wild for our entire ancestral history, and we've been able to bounce back and recover from those things and continue on to build empires, right? So the problem is if we're not resourced enough, if our nervous system doesn't feel like it has the capacity to release or resolve these issues, it will hold on to it. And these trauma and stress responses become habitually trapped in the patterns of our body. So to understand this, we really have to understand something called the fascia, and this is the tissue that houses our nervous system. It wraps around all of our organs. It's a type of connective tissue, so it holds all our organs in place. And this is why talk therapy doesn't always work for trauma. We're not holding it in our brains, we're holding it in our bodies. Our mind is not separate from our body, so even if we want to resolve a memory that is conscious, we still need to look at the body. So we have to work with the body to heal stress and trauma. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a certified provider of tension and trauma releasing exercises. This is a purely somatic method of releasing tension and trauma in the nervous system. So when you come to those classes, it's not like coming to a group therapy session. And also, even though it has the word exercise in it, people of all ability levels are able to do it. I've taught it to people who are bedbound, so it's not a big exertion. You don't have to worry about that. It's some really gentle movements that basically help your body start to release through shaking and trembling. And it's very safe. Even if you have neurological symptoms and you feel like you shake or vibrate already, part of that might actually be your body trying to release trauma and not being fully able to, because when you feel that, you get scared and you lock down and you don't really let it fully happen. And so this modality is so powerful because it is a structured technique, but it also is helping these innate processes in the body just unfold naturally. So you likely will actually have a reduction in your neurological symptoms once you start using this technique. The other thing we provide are nervous system tools, which we also call brain exercises. And basically what these do is they help shift your habitual brain patterns. We often are coming to our recovery with these very deep subconscious beliefs. And I mentioned some of those before, right? Like, I'm broken, something's wrong with me, I'm just full of toxins. And when we really get down to it, our own emotional patterns and thoughts can be perceived as a threat or even a toxin by the body. So we really do need to work on our beliefs, our habitual thoughts, the way we talk to ourselves. So we use a series of techniques that we find much more effective than just kind of classic meditations. A lot of people, especially people who are neuroatypical, and that coincides with all these conditions too, they may not do well with just your average meditation practice that you're gonna download an app for online. So we use very specific techniques out of mindfulness, focus practice, and compassion practice. And these are techniques that help you through a structured practice shift your habitual brain state. And they actually provide measurable shifts in our brain waves. So the reason we use these is that they've actually been developed by studying EEG brain scans on people using these techniques, and they've seen that even for neuroatypical people, you have objective shifts in your brain waves and what parts of the brain are having activity. So they really objectively work. So that's a summary of all the techniques and how we address the microbial hijack, the toxicity, and the trauma and unresolved stress all together. Now you might be asking, how do you access all of these amazing tools? Well, hopefully that summary is enough just to give you a sense of what this kind of work entails, but we would love you to come join us, me and my incredible team at Whole Body Healing. I think we have a really special group of people teaching you because all of my coaches have either recovered from very serious chronic illness themselves, or they've had someone very close to them recover using these specific protocols. So not only do they know what you are going through, like they get the symptoms that you're having, they've been there too, but they also have been through exactly what you're doing, and they have that personal experience, and they've been directly trained by me in addition to their own specialized medical and health coach training that they have. Now, as I mentioned before, this approach is actually very simple. We are asking you to actually implement all sorts of day-to-day small practices that you may not be consistently able to do just on your own. So yes, you can certainly try it on your own and hopefully you get some results, but we find that it's really helpful for people to have the guidance and have a peer group that is going through the same thing. People often do have questions about their specific situation and how they might implement these practices considering what they are specifically going through, and we want you to have clear and consistent guidance, and honestly, we really want it to be simple. When we feel like something's overcomplicated, it gets overwhelming, and that doesn't help you heal. So we're here to help you. We have a coaching program called Immune Resilience, and the curriculum is designed to address all three of these foundations that I talked about today. So the microbiome hijack and the nutrition piece, the gentle detoxification, and the trauma release exercises, and the brain exercises. So we want you to implement all of these things together because that gives you the best chance at helping your body feel safe enough to just recover naturally. So when you join our program, we have a few different tiers. You get immediate access to our full and detailed curriculum, and on every tier, you get 6 Zoom calls every month with me and my other coaches. The topics rotate, so you're always getting more information and reinforcement about the foundations we talk about in the curriculum. Plus, there's always time for Q&A. So the topics are going to be about our nutritional approach, our detoxification techniques, how to implement all of these things as a daily routine, plus practice with the brain exercises and the trauma release exercises. Also, on all the tiers, you get access to our Rebuild Yourself community forum, and we have a really incredible community there. Honestly, people are super positive. We don't let people do any trauma dumping or be negative there, you know, like you see on some of these chronic illness message boards. Everyone is really focused on learning and growing and healing, but they're gonna have similar symptoms and conditions to you, so they can also provide you that peer support. And we have coaches checking that forum daily, answering your questions, and so if you do have a question in between groups, you can always post it on there. And we have a few tiers, so the lowest cost would be to just do the group classes, but we have other tiers that also build in one-on-one sessions with either me or my coaches, so you can pick the option that is the best level of support that you need for your budget and your personal situation. Our curriculum goes for 6 months, but you can start at any time. We do really want people to commit for 6 months because, again, this is not a quick fix. We're not offering you a 4-week cleanse. This is offering you a deeper lifestyle change, working on that whole mind, body, gut, brain axis. And we find that this provides much deeper results. But if we're healing on that level, it does take time to unfold. So we ask you to commit for 6 months. We have a month-to-month payment plan, or you can get a discount if you are able to pay in full upfront. So you'll see all the options linked below this video. You can also go directly to our website, wholebodyhealingwithjen.com, and look under group coaching. If you have more questions after watching this webinar, you can certainly shoot us an email. We'd be happy to answer. I really hope you join us. This is such a different approach than most people are taking. And again, it's simple, but it's profound. So please start your journey to truly rebuild yourself and gain immune resilience.